Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We have reached another Friday, and of course that means I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everyone out there. This week we are doing something a little bit different again, and we are focusing in on documentaries all about food. Food and drink, actually. So if you are a foodie, if you're interested in the food industry, if you like coffee, if you like anything that has to do with documentaries at all, please, please, please make sure you stay tuned for the entire 6 recommendations I have. I think they're a really fun set of films, and I definitely think you'll be starving by the end of them. So, as always, all of these recommendations are available totally for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, and they're all available via our 3 video services, which are CleveNet Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into those recs. Per usual, my first recommendation comes from the CleveNet Overdrive service, and it is for a film called Sriracha. Now, Sriracha, as you can probably guess, is all about that ubiquitous red hot sauce that you see in tons of Chinese restaurants and Thai restaurants, pretty much anywhere that has Asian flair or otherwise. I've actually even seen Sriracha sauce at like Mexican restaurants. It's sort of the go-to spicy sauce for that extra dose of umami these days. And um, director Griffin Hammond decided to actually make a film all about this particular sauce because while he was a huge lover of the flavor, he knew literally nothing about it. Like, he didn't know where it came from, its origins. It was just a complete and total mystery to him. So he started looking into it, and he discovered some really interesting things. And to be perfectly honest, when I watched it, I was really totally surprised by a lot of things that were uncovered as well. It's super short. It's only 30 minutes, so it takes very little time out of your day, but it's absolutely fascinating what you discover. Sriracha is, of course, from the Huifeng Foods Company. And if you couldn't guess from the name, it does have a bit of an Asian background, but it is totally manufactured in the United States. So it's definitely one of those fusion foods that just sort of has this vibe to it that everyone assumes it's a thoroughly Asian creation. Anyway, uh, it's definitely a film for lovers of spice, but it's also just a film for people who are interested in how things like ingredients are developed. And I really liked kind of hearing about how the creator came up with the idea of it and everything like that. It's just a really interesting film. Um, I would say you don't have to be a devotee of this particular sauce to enjoy the movie, but there is a level of like added enjoyment that comes with it. Especially if you're somebody who just likes spicy food in general. They do talk about spice a lot. If you're somebody who enjoys East Asian foods, this is definitely one. You'll see a lot of other East Asian ingredients included and talked about, so you definitely get that sort of travel vibe going on in the movie as well. The other thing that's really pretty cool is you get a pretty good look at David Tran's sort of backstory. David Tran is the gentleman who created and runs the Huifeng Foods Company, and he has a ton of different ingredients that you'll see at pretty much every grocery store. It doesn't even have to be like Fine Foods grocery or anything like that. I mean, you can pick up his company's bottles at like Walmart. It's so pervasive throughout the American food chain now. So that part I really do enjoy hearing about company history and background. So that was really fascinating too. So yeah, it's a quick watch and it's definitely very entertaining. You hear a lot of fanboy and fangirling going on from sriracha sauce devotees because the video definitely interviews people who are absolutely in love with it. to add just a little bit of extra personality. But like I said, even if you're not someone who's so enamored with this particular ingredient, it's still thoroughly enjoyable simply because it's just a very interesting documentary that does a nice, thorough approach in a quick amount of time. So, yeah, Sriracha, excellent pick, and that's from CleveNet's Overdrive. All right, moving right along to our Hoopla digital recommendations. My first rec from Hoopla is for a documentary called Baristas. Now, Baristas is really fun, really interesting documentary that follows these four coffee baristas. I don't even know if that's redundant. Are all baristas coffee baristas? Anyway, um, I really, really enjoyed this because it follows specifically four baristas as they sort of develop their routines on the way to the World Barista Championship, which takes place in Seoul, South Korea. Now, these four are already nationally renowned. They come from all different parts of the globe, and they all have their special skills. You know, they have something that nobody else can do, kind of. And we see them, you know, really buckling down and trying, and we see how important this particular competition is for them. Now, as someone who definitely enjoys coffee, but also is okay with drinking like Starbucks, like I don't turn up my nose at like chain coffee. I still am really fascinated by the people who are so invested in artisanal coffee making. I think it's so interesting how, you know, everybody has all of these different methods, like how long you roast the beans, how exactly you roast the beans, the different methodology to steaming and frothing milk. And we see this sort of super calculated, super methodical study of this particular craft. And, you know, these four people are so dedicated, and it's really fascinating to watch their passion sort of come to a head with this massive global competition. Now, um, Baristas is actually kind of a follow up film to an earlier documentary called Barista, which just sort of focused on one particular artisan, and is also an excellent movie and also available on Hoopla. So if you like this one, you can definitely watch the first installment. But you don't have to see either film to enjoy them as individual entities. Like I didn't even know that Baristas was sort of a spin-off. So, and I thoroughly enjoyed the film. So, again, absolutely not necessary to watch them in order or even to watch them both at all. But I did love that interplay of sort of comparison, having four different artisans available to see how absolutely diametrically opposed some of them are. Like the methodology is so different from one to the next that you wonder how they're even making coffee altogether. I mean, you would think they're making completely different drinks. The way that they approach things is so fundamentally separate, but it still manages to be the same thing. And I thought that was incredible. I'd not really thought about everything that goes into a simple cup of coffee, simple in air quotes, of course. Um, so yeah, I definitely loved the personalities of these four that you meet. They're very interesting people, very dedicated and very focused as well. But they're very different personalities. They're very their approach to things is completely different. I loved, and I absolutely loved that, and I thought that sort of pitting them against one another was also a really simple but thoroughly effective way to make this more about a competition. You know, it definitely makes you more excited to keep watching. So, yes, if you are a coffee lover, if you are a fan of those sort of chefy competition shows, if you're just interested in a film about international cooking in general, if you like looking at those sorts of competitions, absolutely watch Baristas. It's a fantastic documentary. I had so much fun watching it. I mean, really, really, it was just a lot of fun. So, again, Baristas available on Hoopla Digital. My next Hoopla Digital recommendation is for a phenomenal, phenomenal documentary called Ramen Heads. Now, as someone who absolutely loves ramen and grew up loving ramen, which of course is a noodle soup dish, ramen specifically is very strongly tied to Japan, but many, many cultures sort of are what are behind the whole concept of ramen. But yes, Ramen Heads focuses on Japanese ramen, and specifically Osamu Tomita's ramen making. He's like considered sort of the king of all ramen makers in Japan. And because ramen is such a massive thing in the country, he's like looked at as almost this noodle god, right? Um, he approaches making this dish as a lifelong quest. He's won so many awards, he's gotten so many massive international accolades, but there's no such thing as a perfect bowl of soup or ramen to him. It just doesn't exist. The goal is always to make it better. And hearing him talk about it, that's what I find amazing and so engrossing about this film. Um, Listening to Tomita talk about ramen is like listening to the finest artist talk about his craft. Like it, that's really how he feels about this sort of artisanal cooking. It's not like what we think of when we think of ramen here in the States for the most part, you know, the little quick dried, quick flash fried and frozen brick of noodle with the MSG laden soup, MSG and sodium laden soup mix. This is something that can take days to make, just the broth base. It can take, you know, days and days and days to source all of the different ingredients that go into making one single bowl. I mean, there's just this very specific dedication that he has. And when you listen to the interviews of the people who follow his career, his devotees, like it's like he's a superstar. You know, he's a massive celebrity in his own right, and these people will do anything to get a bowl of ramen from him. You know, like they will wait for hours and hours and hours online in line just to get one bowl. And you know, the other thing that I really loved about this particular documentary is listening to how many, many, many of the people that are interviewed are so dedicated to the concept of small local farms and sourcing their ingredients from those places. Like, it's never about the cheapest ingredients. It's never about the most convenient. It's about the absolute best and supporting those small local places. And I love anything that talks about that, you know. I mean, we live in an area that we're fortunate enough to sort of be able to go to these tiny, small farm stands and farmers markets and everything, and we know where we can actually meet the people who make the ingredients we have. But you know, a large portion of the population that they're talking about here, they live in these massive cities. So if you want like farmers goods, like it's a trek to get to them. But they understand the dedication, the importance of that, and I just, it's so inspiring when you listen to it. um so yeah, I just absolutely loved this movie. um it sort of follows Tomita for about a year, a little bit more than a year, as he's developing new recipes, as he's um, emboldening different broths, things like that. And you really see the path and journey that he goes on. And I just think that's so fascinating and really, really cool when what is just essentially a bowl of soup uh, becomes so much more because you find out everything that goes into it. It's such a it's not just this bowl of water with noodles in it anymore. So yeah, if you are interested in Japanese culture, watch this. If you are also a ramen fan, obviously watch this. If you like um, movies about artisanal approach to dishes, if you like movies about sort of like fan bases, if you're like a Trekkie kind of uh, fan, then this is really a great movie for you. It reaches a ton of different demographics, and it absolutely will catch your attention. So Ramen Heads on Hoopla, absolutely worth checking out. Phenomenal film. Okay, my final three recommendations are all, of course, from our Canopy service, and the first of those is for a documentary called Steak Revolution. This is obviously perfect for the carnivores out there. If you are a lover of steak, this documentary 100% needs to go on your to be watched list. I was starving by the end of it. I mean, really, I just really, really was craving steak at the end because uh, this film does an amazing, amazing job of showing everything that goes into what should theoretically be a fairly simple dish. Um, because this really focuses on, that slab of meat. It's not like all of these different foofy ingredients and everything like that. No, it is cow on a plate. And it still makes it so amazing looking. And um, it's just like I said, you will be starving by the end. If you are not a vegetarian or a vegan, this is definitely one that needs to be on your list of films to watch. So what Steak Revolution does is it sort of treks different regions and their approach to raising beef cattle, and how it goes from beef cattle to, again, the meat slab on the plate. And it's really, really, really interesting. Um, they sort of look at countries like Japan. Of course, you've got Japan with Wagyu, with Kobe beef, with all of these different super foofy beefs um, that, you know, everyone's heard like they give like beer massages to the cows and things like that. Uh, but it beyond just like the approach to farming, it also talks about public's response to these kinds of meats. um, it talks about how they approach like portions, how they approach styles of cooking, and how all of that sort of blends together in this whole very specific meat culture. You've got Argentina with those really, really famous steakhouses where they carry around like the meat on a stick. I don't know how better to put it. It's like all of these different cuts on a giant, I guess, giant metal skewer that looks almost like a saber, and these meat sabers go from table to table, and it's just sort of fascinating, um, the approach to serving steak in these different nations. Um, Brazil also has like the giant skewers on meat. Actually, um, I think most countries have different, like, sort of skewered meat approaches, and they do talk about that. France and their approach to farming and beef. Spain, which has a huge, huge beef production. And of course, the US and the different approaches, both feedlot and then free range. I mean, they talk about that a lot, how the different methods will absolutely produce cows that have different resulting flavors and what can be expected from what. Um, and at the end of the day, the film sort of asks you what makes the perfect steak to you. Um, it interviews farmers, it interviews chefs. You see interviews with um, these longtime family run butcher shops that talk about sort of the arc and change of the industry throughout like lifetimes of work. Um, Steakhouse owners, things like that. It's just really interesting. I've never watched a documentary that had such a narrow focus, that had so many different avenues that it traveled at the same time. It's just really interesting, and I really really liked it. Um, it definitely has a point of view. I will say that, like, as far as approach to farming and things like that. So just be aware that you will 100% see that come across in the film. But regardless of how you feel about specific farming methodology, I still think that this is one of those films that you definitely want to watch, especially if you're a foodie and just enjoy um, films about food industry in general. So yeah, please check out Steak Revolution. Don't watch it on an empty stomach unless you don't mind being starving at the end. But yeah, Steak Revolution on Canopy. Also on Canopy, if you have a sweet tooth, you should definitely check out World's Fair Waffle. Now, World's Fair Waffle sort of traces the history of the Belgian waffle. Now, I'm not a huge waffle person, but I do occasionally enjoy like a foofy Belgian waffle. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. And so watching this was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about the history of this particular dish. Um, so apparently, the first super authentic Belgian waffle, and the only one remaining, at least this is the claim, uh, is this Belgian waffle that you're able to get at the New York World's Fair. Um, Even after watching, I'm still sort of like, but I mean, they're all kind of like homagey to Belgian waffles. So as a non-Belgian waffle devotee, I definitely am like, still want a waffle somewhere. But I did find it really, really interesting to hear the history, like how it traveled from Belgium, of course, to the States in the first place, and then what makes all of these non-authentic Belgian waffles not authentic. Like, why are they not considered a real Belgian waffle? Why are they just a good waffle? Because I mean, there are plenty of waffles that are good that are not from the World's Fair, right? So it was just really, really fascinating. And you hear about specifically the family that uh, serves this last remaining or only authentic Belgian waffle in the US. And you sort of see, their pride in this. And if you have ever watched like documentaries about things like pizza or burgers, then you already know like that sort of fervor that lives behind that mythology that things like this have, like the only Belgian waffle, the first pizza, the first cheeseburger in America, kind of thing. And I love that. I love uh, like food mythology, things like that, because who really knows like the actual truth of a statement like that? But this particular documentary does an excellent job of making the topic thoroughly entertaining while still sort of keeping a little bit of distance. It's not presenting it as like the only waffle idea out there, while still being super respectful and everything like that. So if you have a sweet tooth, because you definitely will be craving something kind of sweet at the end of this, if you like history, it definitely has a really great hint of Americana history in here too, especially talking about the World's Fair. If you like stories about families and family pride and family tradition, please check out World's Fair Waffle. This one is such a fun one, and like I said, it's a sweet, sweet movie. So, World's Fair Waffle, also available on Canopy. Now, my very last recommendation for this week is for an absolutely incredible documentary. This one is probably my favorite documentary of them all. I actually saw it a few years ago and was so impressed with it then that when I even decided to do another set of food documentary recs. I already knew that this was going on my list if I could just manage to find it somewhere on one of the services. So in any case, my final recommendation is for the documentary The Birth of Sake. Now, sake is this really traditional rice wine from Japan. It is like, you know, similar to beer here in the US or in Germany or wherever you want to focus. But here in the US, of course, you've got all of these craft breweries going on. I mean, like, it's a huge thing right now, right? So you have these little breweries that do this super, super, super specific, super artisanal craft beers. With sake, and this film in particular focuses in on families that have been doing this micro brewing of sake for generations. And I mean, when I say generations, I mean generations, like hundreds of years they've been doing this. And the attention to detail, the dedication, the borderline obsession with the perfect bottle of sake is absolutely fascinating. This documentary is so engrossing. Like, I had no idea, like, the different methods that even could go into brewing a bottle. I mean, I don't know a ton about all of the processes to begin with, like with the fermentation and everything, but I've been on like craft brewery tours, like with the big, like, what are they? I don't even, like, the metal basins that they put everything all together, and I just sort of look at most fermented beverages like that. I don't really go too in depth in what makes it, but oh my goodness, all of the steps that go into some of these brew houses of sake, it's almost awe-inspiring, the different levels of focus. Like, each single step has to be done with a precision that I can't even contemplate in some ways. Like, and at the end of the day, you're making a bottle of sake. Like, it's almost funny, but obviously not. I mean, this is generations of livelihood for people, but I just find it so fascinating, and I loved watching every moment of this. Like, the development of the skill that people have to do in order to be part of this craft. Like, people enter into the industry, like, when they, at the moment they can, because they know it's going to take decades for them to become masterful at this particular skill. Like, they some of them may never become master brewers. It's just that complicated. And seeing that, and seeing the dedication and the hope and the desire to be better and to create something better is so interesting. I really, really loved this documentary. If you are interested in family dynamics, history, obviously in craft brewing, if you are interested in East Asian culture, if you are interested in East Asian history, I there's just so many things that this documentary covers. If you just like a really well-made documentary in general about anything, please, please, please check out Birth of Sake. It is phenomenal. It's my big rec of the week. I absolutely love this movie. So with that, my set of recommendations for foodie documentaries has come to an end. As always, if you have any recommendations you'd like to make, please, please, please make a comment below. Let us know. I'm always looking for more documentary recs. I love food documentaries in general. I always find them a lot of fun, if hunger-inducing. And if you have any recommendations for themes you'd like to see us cover in the future, please recommend those in the comments as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye!